Hello people of TikTok, welcome to today's video. Today is the first in a series of videos, two perhaps three, that will explore the rebellions of Lower Canada in 1837 and 1838. So let's get right to it. So here we are, between November of 1837 and November of 1838, the good people of Lower Canada rebelled against their British overlords. What was going on? What caused this to happen? What were the consequences, and what were some of the reasons why it all happened in the first place? So let's start by a quick little review of Lower Canada. Lower Canada is a British colony. Became a British colony in 1763 after the 7 Years' War, when the French lost the war to the British, and the British Empire took over Lower Canada, or took over what was then New France and renamed it Lower Canada. So this is essentially Quebec, but pretty much the southern half of Quebec. So of course, very francophone and very Catholic, which are a couple key elements. But after the British took over, of course, they installed their own people in positions of power and in positions of commerce. So you have an Anglophone minority, but the Anglophone minority essentially controls more of what's going on in the colony than does the Francophone majority. That essentially is the core of the problem. But let's talk a little bit about political structure. First of all, the largest body was the Legislative Assembly. And the Legislative Assembly was elected, so of course it was primarily Francophone, with some Anglophones in there as well. And their role was to pass bills and suggest rules and laws and changes to the upper echelons of government. So who were those upper echelons of government? Above the Assembly, you had the Legislative Council. And Legislative Council was an appointed council, so it was very much like a British House of Lords or the current Canadian Senate. And its job was to take a look at the bills that came from the Assembly and decide if they were worthy of being passed, and if they were going to be passed, then they would move them on to the governor. So then above them, you also had something called an Executive Council, which was an even smaller body, and once again appointed, as was the Legislative Council. And their job was to basically give advice to the governor about all things related to running the colony. And they were, of course, handpicked by the governor as well. So then at the top, you've got the governor, who was always going to be an English noble, or at least a rich Englishman. And he had the final say pretty much in everything. And it's also of interest that the Executive Council often served as the high judiciary in the system as well. So it's not exactly what you would call a separation. So that was the political structure. So what's happening in Upper and Lower Canada to cause some challenges? The major issue is that Francophones are increasingly finding that the things that they're looking for to make their lives better are being ignored by the English hegemony, I guess you could say. So what do we mean by that? Well, what we mean is lots of ideas coming forth from the countryside, going into the Assembly, moving forth to the Legislative and Executive Councils, and then not being done. They were paying taxes. They were living in a society that was looking after them. They're paying taxes, and they wanted to have more say in where their taxes were going, among other things. But they wanted a little more freedom in terms of how the colony was being run. And I'll give you one perfect example. If you look at the map that is going to pop up here shortly of a typical seigneury setup, you'll see that, as I mentioned earlier, the seigneuries are narrow strips of land fronted onto the river, which allows access to water, of course, for irrigation, etc. And these farmers would generally have a subsistence type living, but anything that was surplus, and as times got better and as farming techniques got better, there'd be more and more surplus. So they would sell that to the merchants in the cities, who would then sell it to other places and ship it out. If necessary, especially to the United States. So that meant that the people who were in charge of the upper parts of the colony, they are more interested in things like developing river transportation, canals, etc., because that's how product is being moved at this time. whereas the farmers who are running the seigneuries, they are far more interested in the development of a road network so that it's easier for them to get their products to market. If there's a better road system, then they can actually bring the products themselves to the market and sell them, whereas now they have to rely on the bigger shipping companies, which of course are owned by the English merchants, etc. So that's basically how things are progressing in the years of 1837 or leading up to 1837. So that's it for part one. That gives you a little bit of an update on or a background on excuse me, on Lower Canada and how problems were beginning to brew. I'll look for part two coming soon, which will outline some of the main events of the rebellion.